Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Zarowick. Sejan.
Hey, everybody. Dev, we're officially counterculture again.
Oh, yay! I gotta be honest with you, I was just nervous I had forgotten to set us both to be recording, and then I was too scared to look at the screen. But look, hearing that we're counterculture again, it's all right if none of this was recorded. But good news, it was. It was all recorded. Jesus, criminy crook. I don't boop-a-doo. First of all, thank you for joining us for our all-crow, all-the-time block of the Say Report. That was fun, doing the very special episode. Then we did have a Studio of Terror, and then we did the 2024 time capsule episode on the Crow. I forgot how to record. That's what this is about. And it's funny that I say I forgot how to record and how to do the show, because we also did an Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe and Hotel Transylvania 2. But that show was the most cerebral I think we've ever gotten in our more academically minded podcast.
It's a real problem right now. Like I have got some feeling. So I watched the third one after everything because we just had such a good time with it. And it led to me taking the obvious, notes that we do for that show. And it just went off for me. And I've got all of these feelings about the genre of that film. And there's so much I want to talk about it. It's killing me that this is not the medium for it right now.
Well, we can talk about that off camera, off microphone. And maybe we can arrange a time to just get that one down on paper. I think I'd be fine with that. But right now, in order to return to our Say Report spiritual roots and grounds, you saw the title of the episode. We cannot deny one of the things we're going to talk about today, and I'd rather just talk about it, purge it, get rid of it. And it involves a little bit of backstory. You got a time capsule on Monday, and there's a reason why you got that time capsule. And I know of at least one listener who knows the reason. Thank you, Claude, for keeping your hat on it. But Sejan came back to the motherland last week, which was a lovely surprise for me. But at 11 a.m. last Sunday, instead of recording an episode, we were driving around Plainville, Massachusetts, having just enjoyed a delightful breakfast at the Village Griddle. Not a sponsor, but I will give them a little bit of free airtime, because I love eating at the Village Griddle. It's delicious food. Local references do get you local work. And we had done something at the Village Griddle that I'm not proud of.
We did a couple of things at the Village.
We did do a couple of things at the Village Griddle that I'm not proud of, but only one of them is the central focus of the opening of this episode. Before we have many things to discuss.
I think that there's going to be more conversation to be had about exactly this topic, but I do know that you need to get this off of your chest, so let's do it.
So usually when I go to the Village Griddle, it's around 7:45 in the morning. So I don't have to wait for a table. We had to wait for a table, and here's the beautiful thing about this little breakfast spot that I took Sejan last week. They show, specifically on Sundays, I've been there on Saturdays and Sundays, but on Sundays, they show kids' films on their Netflix accounts, which is fine and fun. We got to watch, we watched Storks and Boss Baby.
Yes, that's the conversation I want to have. Is we watched. So there's two giant TVs. To make the setup extremely clear, there are two big TVs up on the wall right behind the counter of the diner. So basically, wherever you are in the restaurant, you got a pretty good view of what it is. We were eventually directly right in front of them, right? But the idea is that as we were waiting, Storks was on one TV and Boss Baby was on the other, and they were both running at a pretty good click with each other. Like they were pretty much on track to both end at the same time. It was very well paced, very well chosen, and fuck me, watching the two of those next to each other brought on all sorts of shit. And the fact that that's not what you want to talk about today only speaks to how insane the other movie was. Because watching Boss Baby, a movie about basically how unborn babies, don't be sad, unborn babies are still okay in heaven. They're given office jobs.
Oh, and that's what that terrible movie is about.
Going on there. And then Storks, where the entire concept is a love story between a stork and a woman, and them having to decide whether or not they want to give up this child that they have found.
Yeah, no, I guess No, you're right. We've talked about Stork's brief on this one before. But yeah, so those are the two that we're playing. And both of them, at least one of them, I don't know if I could do a full Boss Baby episode, but I am totally on board for a Stork's episode sometime in the history of the Say Report. I will
never be able to separate the two from one another now, Devin. That was fair. Really a religious experience watching the two
really
of them side by side.
And then Stork's ended, and we watched as they played foreign language trailers for other kids' films, including the foreign language Kung Fu Panda 3 trailer, which is not something I ever knew I needed in my life. But one of the trailers that played after Stork's ended was Harold and the Purple Crayon. And I'm just like, oh, Harold and the Purple Crayon. I could never watch that movie. Fuck Zach Levi, all this other stuff, right? All the reasons why we're now culture again, which is fun, right? But we can talk about that later. But then eventually they put on The Prince of Egypt to follow up Storks on TV1. And as we sit down, Boss Baby ends, and we're right in front of the Boss Baby TV, or TV2. And they just put on the next movie that comes on, which was Harold and the Purple Crayon. And I'm like, I never wanted to watch this movie. And there's like this no-nonsense. I mean, every diner needs that no-nonsense waitress. But the no-nonsense waitress, who reminds me of Rogue from X-Men, turns around and goes, well, now you're going to have to. Like, you could leave, but you waited for 20 minutes to get your seats at the counter. And you're going to watch Harold and the Purple Crayon, you piece of shit. And, that's what we did. We watched the first hour silent. We could not hear it, but there were subtitles of this movie. And we watched the first hour of Harold and the Purple Crayon, a film that I never wanted to watch. I never wanted to support, right? All of these, I have issues with a lot of the things that happen in particular with that film. People who are a part of its construction. But we watched an hour of it, and damned if I wasn't hooked by that first hour of Harold and the Purple Crayon. A sentiment
hooked isn't necessarily the way I'd put it. I would say more like snagged in a net and unable to be released. It is one of those things where you know just enough about what's going on with the thing that you're like, well, I now need to know the rest, right? It's the same thing that kind of gets me into like a good like criminal like Netflix doc is like, if I don't know anything about the situation, I usually can avoid those things and tend to like the plague because they're not like fun experiences. But the second I hear like an NPR story or somebody talking about it and they give me just enough info where they're just like, yeah, and then it's how I got into Serial. Like I was never into Serial when it first started, the podcast Serial.
I thought you meant the food, and I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But no, continue. Yes, Serial, the podcast.
No, I don't know if that's like a thing still in the world, but yeah, when that first came out and it was this huge hit, I just had no interest in it because true crime is not a genre I tend to immediately enjoy. Let me put it that way, right? But the second that everybody was talking about it and I got a little bit of the story here, I got a little bit of the story there, and then found out like, oh my god, they completely ignored like alibis and things like that people had. I was just like, well, fuck, now I need to know the rest of it, right? And it was exactly that, of watching Harold of the Purple Crayon and in an hour silently, as you pointed out, watching this and only getting admittedly bits and pieces, although I feel like we got some pretty hefty pieces because we were right in front of it, and you know, it's not like it's impossible to watch a movie with only subtitles. That's kind of the whole point of them. So like we got a pretty good chunk of that movie, and you were just like, I need to know how this ends, and I felt that as well, but maybe not as obligated. Part of that may be because I was also thoroughly enjoying the option on the other TV, which, just for continuity to point out what was playing on the other TV side by side with this, was fucking Prince of Egypt. A movie I've seen a million times in my life, so even though it was silent, I knew exactly, like, I could watch 2 seconds of that and know exactly where we were at. So, like, I'm watching Prince of Egypt on one side and then Harold and the Purple Crayon in front of me, and we had a moment when we both finished our food and looked at each other and looked at the screen, and I had to be the one to say, no, we need to go. We cannot justify sitting in this. First of all, they're trying to clear space. People are still waiting, upwards of 40 minutes.
It was 9:35, Sejan. It was 9:35. That we've crossed the 9:35 line. That was a moment. That was a shared moment in the Village Griddle where the two hosts looked at each other and like, it's 9:35. And I didn't know what that meant until I now know exactly what that means. It's when they get busy. And they were already pretty hopping. But that 9:35...
When we came in, it was a 20-minute wait for 2, right?
Yeah.
And that was with us saying that we were down for wherever the fuck. They could sit us in the back by the trash and we would just eat it if that's what it took. And it still took 20 minutes. By the time we left, they were telling people like an hour wait.
Yeah, it's an hour
That place
wait.
was insane.
Yeah. It's good food. I mean, I get it. I understand it. So... just because the Prince of Egypt has been mentioned again, I've never seen that movie and I really want to. So my only place to look TV-wise was at Harold and the Purple Crayon.
You had no respite.
I had no respite.
There was no safety. There was no oasis in the desert.
Occasionally our waitress came by and she was a real pip. I will admit that. We were having fun. She mocked me for putting ice into my coffee. Something I'm sure Reagan will be happy to hear when this story is related to her, because she gives me crap. She's like, you should just order iced coffee. I don't get it. I don't understand. But I like the heat. It warms me up. And actually, Reagan defended me. It's Claude who gave me shit about putting ice in my coffee. So I'm sorry I got you two confused. But she was like the only respite, and she was busy. So we only had like her interaction every so often. But yeah. But when I say I was into and needed to know what happened with Harold and the Purple Crayon, I did not need to know what happened to Harold. I did not need to know what happened to Moose. I didn't really care about Terry, played by Zooey Deschanel, which was a surprise. I did not know she was part of that film. She worked at Ollie's, which was another thing. If you don't know what Ollie's is, I like... neither does Harold and the Purple Crayon. I didn't really care about Mel. I didn't care about Jermaine Clement's character, Gary, or Gagar.
I mean, I did by default because it's Jermaine Clement, so...
Yeah, I mean, I like Jermaine Clement. My favorite part about this Harold and the Purple Crayon movie, I haven't even talked about the person I cared about in this movie yet, but is that Jermaine Clement's voice and acting is inspired by British actor Matt Berry, is in IMDb trivia, and it's like, oh, is it? Thank you for that. I'm a big fan of Matt Berry, though, so I got to bring that up. No, the person who I was so invested in the storyline of was Porcupine. And here's the weird thing about Harold and the Purple Crayon. We haven't talked enough about the movie part of it yet. So if you're not familiar with the 1955 children's book, it's about a little baby boy named Harold who has a purple crayon, and anything he draws with that purple crayon comes to life. Two of the things that he drew were a moose and a porcupine to be his best friends. And that story ends and Harold is still a baby. But in the movie Harold and the Purple Crayon, baby Harold has just existed in his world, and he's now an adult man. Right? Now, I thought...
within the world of the books.
Within the world of the books,
this is all key. Within the world of the books, he has grown up within the pages of the books, and he is now an adult man, still in a onesie, right?
Yeah, he's still wearing a onesie. Alfred Molina is the narrator of the story, so I guess also technically Jonathan Crockett, because Jonathan Crockett says that I'm your father because I made you, because I'm the author of the book, and that's why I'm the narrator. And it was Alfred Molina. And the fact that he never showed up in the movie, it was just his voice, was very frustrating to me. But again, it's crossing worlds because Harold wonders about the real world as opposed to the world that he lives in. And he's got a magic fucking crayon. So he's able to draw an Einstein-Rosen bridge, sliders, and go from his world to our world. And then Porcupine, who's like the best character, I love Porcupine, I'm just going to say that, forces the moose to go through, but rather than stay a moose in a completely unexplained, like, metamorphosis, he becomes a human man.
He becomes very specifically Lil Ray.
He does become Lil Ray Howery, which I just wanted to slap.
Sorry, I want to make sure that I say that right. Lil Rel Howery.
Yeah.
But like, he becomes this human man who, by all accounts, like, isn't even like, it's not even like there's like a defining characteristic about him that makes him Moose like this is nothing against Lil Rel. He's not a big guy, right? It's not like he's like it's not like a guy that you would just call Moose casually, right? There's nothing that really definitively makes him make sense as Moose. They try and do a little bit of costuming work by putting him in like a fuzzy jacket, but they don't even fully commit to that. Plus nowadays it looks like just the kind of like, and this is probably the bit, but like it just looks like a jacket that anybody would wear. So it doesn't stand out in any way that makes him Moose. They don't give him a funny hat with antlers. They don't do anything to make him definitively Moose-like.
Yeah, it's really strange because that jacket that Sejan's talking about, it's like patchwork, and occasionally there's like a shag carpet section. Like, that's how fuzzy a section of this is. But then otherwise it's like, oh, and here's like a patch of paisley. Here's like,
but it is, I will say they do like, I could see the thought process when if somebody came to me as a costume maker, not the designer, if the designer came to me as the maker and said, you need to make a jacket, a patchwork jacket to go on this character, and he is based on the character Moose from Harold and the Purple Crayon. I see that. It was almost like bounding, right? Like he's bounding as Moose, because the patches are made up of either the brown fuzzy like shag stuff you're talking about, or some type of other purple fabric. There's purple paisley, there's just a straight purple patch, there's purple whatever. So there is a continuity in that regard, but it honestly looks like a jacket that somebody at Hot Topic would sell you for Harold of the Purple Crayon's 50th anniversary or some shit. Like, it looks, but all of this is in contrast to our other character, which I don't want to get away from.
Yeah, so Harold comes through as Harold, onesie and all. Moose comes through, becomes a human man who is wearing this patchwork jacket, as Sejan has just described it, and that the people sitting next to us at the counter thought that it was Kevin Hart, and if it's not Kevin Hart, it's his understudy, which made me a little sad for Lil Rel. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm a big fan of Lil Rel, and I don't want him just to be Kevin Hart's understudy to the world. I think he's a very different talent. I'm just gonna say that. But then Porcupine ends up going through the door, and where Moose is not happy to now be a human being, Porcupine is freaking in love with it. Because Porcupine has a moment in the beginning where she complains about not having thumbs. And now that she's a human, she's got thumbs. She has like a big purple mohawk haircut that represents like her quills that she had before, but she does not have quills, because there's a moment where she tries to attack an old man by turning her back to him and hissing and then being like, oh, I don't have quills. So she's a little bummed about that. She's also outfitted in like the punkest punk attire circa 1980. Like, it's a very clearly a retro punk aesthetic about Porcupine's clothing.
So this character is then played by Tanya Reynolds, for anybody that's keeping track. She I know her from Sex Education. I'm sure she's done more than that. But the important thing about Tanya Reynolds in this particular role is something that I don't think I've ever seen, at least not in Sex Education. The physicality with which she chooses to move around the world as Porcupine is like Paranormal Activity levels upsetting. Like, bodies moving in ways that you're just like, I don't understand what muscles you're moving to get your legs to be able to do that. One scene in particular in which she escapes, for lack of a better word, up a tree as she's running from the police, because that's an ongoing thread in her story in this, that she is consistently on the run from the police in this film. She runs to escape up a tree and somehow is able to like scurry up the tree in a way that I was looking for wire work. I was like, this has to be like Crouching Tiger style, like they did this. But it really, I mean, it didn't seem like it. It seemed like it was just her.
It seemed
and that
very
was
practical.
terrifying.
I'm not gonna lie. It was one of those moments where so spoilers for this. I did end up watching the movie again when I got home. That we were not just going to talk about the silent hour of the movie that we saw. We're going to talk about the last 30 minutes that I did also want to watch everything leading up to it. But watching it again, specifically that scene, I had my eagle eyes on, and it's like, no, it looks like somehow Tanya Reynolds just moved that way. And I understand why Sejin was so bothered by it.
But there's also other moments where she's just like running around like doing like Andy Serkis style like not Lord of the Rings, what's the other series he does, Planet of the Apes style like monkey movements, like running through like gardens and eating shit and things like that. Like like the choice to make her so animalistic in her physicality, and as you pointed out in her costuming, at least like nodding to the concept of quills and stuff with like her hairstyle and things like that. They go so fucking hard on Porcupine and the choice to make them a human that there is something kind of to the idea that they never really talk about why, but that's okay. We see so much of the animal in her that like I don't really want to know, I guess, in a weird way. Whereas with Moose just becomes a dude. And so there is that leftover element of what caused this, because I need to know why he's not more moose-like. If they had gone out of their way to make him more animalistic, just like they did with Porcupine, I don't think I'd care that they never addressed this particular issue. But the fact that with Moose, they just make him just a dude.
And they don't just make him a dude, because that is that they do make him just a dude. But then he also has this nifty little thing where Moose is the fearful friend in Harold and the Purple Crayon. Him and Porcupine, they're not necessarily angel and devil, but it's more like cautious and like sort of rebellion-y, right? Moose
is very Piglet and Porcupine is very Tigger.
Yeah, that's
to
very
Harold's Pooh. Like Harold, he toddles around, not really. He's very naive about the world, doesn't really know what he's getting into, and because sometimes he has a friend that pushes him, he gets into shenanigans, and because sometimes he needs to get out of those shenanigans, he has a very careful friend. Like it's very obvious where the archetypes are as far as like the books go, right?
Right. But whenever Moose gets really, really afraid, he turns into a for real fucking moose, and I don't know why that is. Like, they don't even know why it is. He's like, oh, I guess it's because I was afraid, maybe. But it happens at two very inopportune moments. The almost hit you with a car meet is not even like a meet cute, because the movie ends up not being a romantic comedy in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, it can't be, right? Because, I mean, I know it's the body of Zachary Levi, but this is the Shazam problem, is like, you are supposed to conceptualize of him as still being a child.
I disagree with that. The reason why I thought Zachary Levi was playing Harold of Harold and the Purple Crayon is I thought that it was like this little boy imagining himself as an adult. He has aged. By all accounts, he is 69 years old.
Right.
In real
that's
time,
a whole
right?
other kettle of fish, right? But I do think that's important here is that we're talking about two different things. As a character in the books, he has aged, but he very specifically lives in a world that does not ask him to mature or learn.
Right. He's like Peter Pan.
It's not like he grew up. It's not like Hook, right? Where Peter grows up and he's a lawyer and he's got this job and like it's kind of ruining magic for him. It is the opposite of that. He is still a child. As much as he may be 69 years old, the bit is that he is still naive, he is still ignorant, he is still immature. Like, that is the whole joke with him. So as much as he may have aged numbers-wise, mentally, he is a child. So they cannot make this a romantic bit between him and Zooey Deschanel, because it would just be, to be frank, upsetting.
It'd be like Big, but somehow even more disgusting. Poor Big. I'm never gonna let you live it down, Big. That's just the Devon Decker promise. But yeah, so he ends up, him and Moose are riding on a tandem bicycle. Porcupine is left behind to her own devices and is sad because of that, because she ends up breaking into a house to steal a jacket because she's cold. She steals food because she doesn't understand how our world works. So, like, there's a reason why the cops are on her the whole time, is that she is committing this crime spree through Providence, Rhode Island. Oh, did we mention that it was filmed in Providence, Rhode Island? Because it was.
And story-wise, they name it. Like, it's not just, they filmed it here. They straight up name it, which is a weird choice because apparently Crockett is actually from Connecticut. So why choose Providence? I don't know.
Yeah, the worst thing. So after we finish breakfast, right, telling the story in just the order it comes, right, there was part of me that was like, do you want to go to the Jonathan Crockett house? Apparently it's only 20 minutes from the high school in this movie. That's a fucking Hollywood bullshit to lie. It's in Roatan, Connecticut, which is 2 hours from the center of Providence. There's no way to do it any shorter, unless maybe you draw a plane and fly there in your magic plane. Because I was disappointed that they're like, that's only 20 minutes from here. And it's not. It's like on the other side of Hartford, Connecticut. It's not close.
No.
You're almost in New York by the time you're in Roatan, Connecticut. So that was a weird thing because, like, they did the thing where Rhode Island, the Slether thing, as I call it, where Rhode Island is one big town. Like, they don't really do enough to differentiate the parts of it. It's all everything is Providence.
Yeah.
Which is fun and fine, right? Because it's only going to affect people around here. But yeah, so she's going on this whole sort of crime spree through Rhode Island as Moose and Zachary Levi are riding on a tandem bike and almost get hit by Zooey Deschanel, which causes her to pop her tire. Harold draws her a new tire, but then she still has to change it, which I dug that part of it, right? Because you want to talk about how Harold has not matured at all. He would not know how to change a tire, but he knows how to draw a tire. But then also, couldn't you have just drawn the tire on there? Why would you draw a tire and then be like, but you must still do manual labor? I don't know. These are questions that kept me up at night about Harold and the Purple Crayon.
How did he know what size to draw it?
Yeah, exactly.
What if he had drawn it too big or like with not thick enough walls?
What if it didn't have enough tire pressure in it, right? Like, these are all questions.
This is great, Harold, but I don't have white walls on the rest of my tire.
Yeah. So he does that, and then because, I almost killed you, I guess I'll take you back to my house where I live widowed with my 12-year-old child or 10-year-old child.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. This movie is full of death.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of
introduced
death
early. It is introduced early in the characters of Zooey Deschanel and her son.
Mel and Terry.
Mel and Terry. So it's introduced early in their story because the entire thing is about her being a widower and his dad not being
a widow.
There anymore.
Widowers are men.
And like they have to explain to Harold what death is essentially when he talks about like my dad is not here anymore.
He's
right?
unalive.
And then like that is a continuing theme then throughout the rest of the film.
Yep. They have a conversation about, where's your dad? Oh, he's not living anymore. Oh, do you want to draw something with my purple crayon? That'll make you feel better about your dead dad. And what Mel draws is a terrifying spider fly that is also poisonous. And by all accounts, this is not like the magic crystal from the Donatello micro series where wherever Kirby draws, eventually it fades away to another dimension. Mel has drawn a poisonous spider fly that will never die. Because into
the real world.
Because that's how Zooey Deschanel is woken up that next day by the spider fly. Thank God it didn't bite his mom and kill her, right? Jesus Christ. And she hits it with a book and it's flattened, but then we see it like pop back full of life. And it's like, they're indestructible. And they're just out there. And by the end of the movie, spoilers, there are at least 2 of them. This world ends. They propagate and destroy the world. It's like that episode of Sliders with the spider wasps, but somehow more disturbing because this one, there's no stopping it. You can leave in Sliders. So they're like trying to find the old man, right? Because that's Harold's goal, is to find his old man, which is just weird that like they keep using that phrase, but it'll have meaning later. And they find a newspaper that's like, need help? Go to the library. So they go to the C.C. Bannister Library in Providence, Rhode Island. They get there by rollerblading and skateboarding. Because that's such a long walk. Not if we have wheels on our feet. And that's what we're introduced to.
That old joke from The Stupids when Tom Arnold throws open the garage because he's trying to like find the fastest vehicle he can, and he sees like a bike and he's like 2 tires, and then he sees the car and he's like 4 tires, and then he sees the rollerblades and he's like 8 tires. Yeah.
Yep. I'm excited for 2026 when we get to watch The Stupids along with other
Oh,
Tom
man.
Arnold movies.
And we got to talk about what's his nuts, Bug Malone there, or whatever the fuck his name is. And I don't really want to give him the time of day, but we'll talk about it then.
Yeah, well, we'll hit it then. But yeah, so they.
Bugs Meany. I don't know his actual name, but I'm gonna call him that.
I know exactly. Bug is definitely the first name. He's in American Pie: The Book of Love, so we're also going to have to handle it when we talk about that movie too. Oh, looking to the future as we look at Harold and the Purple Crayon. But then at the library, the master librarian or the head librarian is Jermaine Clement, Gary, who is apparent. I don't know if he ever dated Zoe Deschanel's character, but he's definitely got an incel level creepy crush on her because he is not just the head librarian, but the author of the Gregoror. I don't even know how to say it, and I've heard them say it in the movie a bunch of times. But he wrote like a mythical fantasy novel that he says is larger than Middle Earth and Hogwarts combined. Like he has a moment where he compares it to a bunch of other fantasy worlds and about how deep his lore goes. And in it, there is the beautiful elf maiden who's like Zeri or Mary. Like, it is clearly Zoe Deschanel because of all the shit in this, that's the thing that's illustrated. And so they ask him for help trying to find Harold's father, right? They actually use the term father. And then he does something. This movie, you need to understand, the first hour of this movie had me hooked enough that I needed to see what happened in this film. And they did this thing that I like in movies like this, where he actually knew what Harold and the Purple Crayon was and identified that Harold was Harold from Harold and the Purple Crayon. I mean, he did need to see him draw a friggin' jet plane, but like, the book exists in the world. It's weird when something exists in a world and then nobody is aware of it. You know, like Rampage, the movie Rampage, the fact that the video game Rampage exists in the world of the movie Rampage and nobody makes a comment about that is fucking weird. like why, like, I hate when shit does that. So Jermaine Clement actually, his character Gary, actually identifies that Harold is Harold and that he has the purple crayon. So he becomes a sort of antagonist. But, like, the central plot is Harold trying to get to his father's place, and he finds out about the Jonathan Crockett Museum, and then, like, Porcupine has met up with them again, and they break out of jail with a wrecking ball, and they also let out, like, a definite murderer, whose response to this is, I gotta get me a box of fucking crayons before I go kill another person. He doesn't say before I go kill another person. That is heavily implied, by him being like, I gotta get me a box of crayons. Like, okay.
He is saying, I'm going to go commit crime now with this magic I have learned. Now, to be clear, I don't think he's actually learned magic, but the intent is there.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. So then they go to the Jonathan Crockett Museum, and they find out that Jonathan Crockett is dead, and then Harold is like loses all of his enthusiasm and like beauty and naivete and imagination at hearing this. And as a result of that, though it has not been established prior to this, and it kind of comes from nowhere, everything he's ever drawn with the purple crayon begins to disappear.
I would actually argue the movie did something a little, like, rug pulley. Like, not only is it not mentioned earlier, it's kind of not, it doesn't fit with what is explained. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
it is purposely avoided almost. Because earlier, when they do meet Gary explains the concept of pure imagination to them. Why Harold's magic is because it is the most powerful thing known to man, pure imagination. So, like, they do give you this little bit of lore about the crayon. So the fact that we then learn that if he just gets too sad, it'll go away, that should have been part of that earlier speech with Jermaine Clement, right? I don't know how pure imagination is truly affected by emotion. Like, just because he's sad doesn't mean he did not think of these things, right? But it's kind of this, like, Peter Pan-esque, like, he needs to keep faith in himself in order for the thing to live, right? Like, but again, that's not, like, that doesn't go hand in hand with the concepts that we are already explained in the movie. So, like, the movie kind of completely like goes in a opposite direction with that. I do wonder how much of this movie is kind of that going on, because you mentioned the drawing, right, of the Zooey Deschanel-esque character in Gary's book. And like there was a moment where I just thought, well, he's going to draw that later, right? We're going to get to see Zooey Deschanel as this character in the real world, whether it's that he draws the costume on her or draws this and we get to see Zooey Deschanel play two characters or something. But like they introduce a drawing in a movie about a man who can bring drawings to life with his special crayon. How is that not setting up what happens later?
I mean, so have you not seen the end of this movie?
Of course I have not seen the end of this movie, Devin. I saw the hour we watched together.
Okay. Well, then I'm excited for when we're almost at the threshold moment where we get to what Siegen has seen and Devon has seen more than that. This is exciting. So everything starts.
But for everything that Siegen has seen so far, this movie builds and builds and builds and builds a bunch of stuff, and then just decides to do something else later. And you're just like, okay.
Yep, and that's really, really important because I did not see. Well, we'll explain it as we get there. But the last image that we saw was Moose and Porcupine turning into crayon dust. Like a la the end of Infinity War, they turned to dust. And then it was like that moment they turned to dust where Siege and I looked at each other like, are we going to sit here and watch the rest of this movie in silence, or are we going to leave the Village Green? And it was that like real moment of like no words spoken, but like, I need to know what happens to Porcupine. Yes, so do I. Fuck Moose. Not fuck Moose, but like it was one of those things where like, oh, what are we going to do? But also, I have to admit, I did feel a little bit of the rug pulled out from under me because it does not ascribe to any of the rules that they had established up to that point. So, like, I was able to walk away. But then thinking about it, I'm like, I need to watch it. I need to watch the rest of this movie. Here's what happens in the rest of Harold and the Purple Crayon. No, before here's the rest of what happens in Harold and the Purple Crayon, Siegen and I, after we had seen an hour of the film, were thinking about this might be a fun thing to do. Like with the show, maybe a couple of episodes, maybe a spin-off from the Say Report, where we watch an hour of a kid's movie and then stop and we try to like guess at what's going to happen in the last half hour.
Well, and talk about our impressions, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
What we think is going on and how we feel about that versus whatever third act reveals may occur. But yes, also try and figure out what the ending may be. That would also be fun.
That'd be
but
part
I was
of it.
more
Like,
talking about the idea that like, I don't know if we could tell where this movie's going, but man, I've got some feelings about it right now.
Yes, and that's more what it is. Like it's like, but can we predict based on what we saw what's going to happen? What do we want to have happen based on everything it is? Like, because personally, right after watching just an hour of it, I didn't want Porcupine to have to go back to the world of the book, right? Like she grew so much and she liked being a human so much. There's this moment where she sees her reflection as a human and she's like, hey, beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, like Porcupine is really digging being a human being. And honestly, I get it. She got thumbs now. And if it was, and there's so much more than just the thumbs. So, like, I didn't want that to happen. And Siegen had conjectured that, like, maybe Harold in our real world is going to become an author and pick up where the old man left off. Everybody who's listening to this, every listener, I want you to pause the show for a second, and I want you to write down what you think is going to happen in the last half hour of Harold and the Purple Crayon, just based on everything that we have said up to this point. Harold has left...
I'll give you a couple of minutes too while I point something on some other things out, or at least one other thing out that I think is also really interesting. Is again the ways in which they go so hard on Porcupine and really tell like a really interesting, weird story with this one character out of the whole film. But the other thing that I think is really interesting is that to the whole like punk outfit and costuming and stuff like that, she gets very caught up on how she believes the way that the way things should be, right? She has a very black and white like belief about like, well, food is here, this person's hungry, they should be able to get the food, right? Like that is how she sees the world. And of course that's not how it works, right? So one of my favorite scenes in the movie that we did see was her in the restaurant. Yep. And like trying to just take the food from the thing, and them having to explain that like she like needed money, and like the whole time there's like this kid watching her, and it's this amazing like bit of like her trying to do the right thing and fit into society and get dinner for herself properly at a restaurant, but then she ends up just fucking wrecking the place. And it was like the most like punk rock thing, because she was just like, no, food for all, and then like runs out. Yeah. Like there was just this whole like kind of like fuck society attitude that they end up kind of instilling in this character that makes complete sense when you understand how she sees the world. It, like they do a lot to really build on this character in an interesting way. And so when we saw that the two of them died, essentially, like they turned to dust, and we don't know if Harold's going to be able to figure out how to bring anything back. Like there was this moment where we were just like, is this movie just gonna, is this just how this movie's going to go now? Because like it felt like it had turned into like a Tom Hanks style docudrama at this point, about this guy, about him learning about like the writer of the Harold and Purple Crayon books and how he had passed away, and like and how the real world has this sadness in him that the world of books does not, and like all of this. And I'm just like, there's no way this is how this movie can end. But then we got into the discussion of, is this going to end with them having to all go back into the book? Because Moose really wants that. Clearly, we see that.
That's his whole
and
character.
Harold seems to want that now, but Porcupine doesn't. But then the other side of that is, if they all stay here, Moose does not seem happy here. And also, what happens in the world of the book? So that's what led to this whole thing.
Yeah. I would also like to point out, I don't know if you caught it because it was just no audio or anything. Porcupine loses her mind at that restaurant because the waitress's daughter is drawing with crayons, and she draws on the table. Like she goes a little bit further than the placemat to draw on the table. And the waitress is like, no, we don't draw on the table. And Porcupine loses her mind at like, how dare you stifle the creativity of that child? You don't know what that was going to be, and now we will never know what that was going to be. How dare you tell her she can only draw on the paper if her ideas are larger than the paper? Like, that is a moment too. Like, before that, the whole fuck society, food for all thing, like that little speech from Porcupine was like, I mean, like, you're kind of my new hero character.
Yeah, no, they do all of this work with this character, and like, and again, she's on the run from the police the whole time. She's breaking into gardens to steal vegetables for herself. Like, it's just... It was just a wild choice. I kind of wanted the movie to just be this character. That's all I wanted from the rest.
And I got to tell you, for me, that's what the movie is. The way that I can justify that we have spent 42 minutes talking about Harold and the Purple Crayon in this episode, and I promise you, there's more that we have to talk about. Some incredible things have happened since we last recorded an episode. But, like, she's the reason I watched it. So at this point, you've been given about 5 minutes to write down how you think this movie is going to end. And now I'm going to tell you, because I watched it. And I'm so mad that I watched it. Because never in a billion years would I have thought this is how the movie is going to end. So Jermaine
Did we forget to mention the invisible friend? Isn't that important?
Oh, we forgot to mention Carl. But, like, Carl, we got, like... And Alchemy. Carl's actually an invisible dragon, like, hybrid, because Mel, the young boy, is allergic to dogs. So rather than get him a dog, they get him an imaginary dragon, eagle, like, mythical mishmash creature. And, like, right before everybody dies, Carl is drawn by Mel and brought to life. So also, we know that the Purple Crayon can create living drawings, not just when Harold draws them, right? Anybody who possesses the crayon, because he breaks his crayon in half and gives half of it to Mel, which, like, okay, pure imagination, we move on from there. So Jermaine Clements, you know, he wants to bring his fantasy world to life. So he goes to Harold and he's like, I figured out how to get you home, Harold. So Harold goes to them, and he's betrayed by Jermaine Clement, who creates a dungeon with the purple crayon and chains up both Harold and Mel in this dungeon, and then also makes the floor drop out from under them. Because, of course, he does. As he goes out and is like drawing all of his fantasy world to bring his fantasy world to life. They escape because Mel still has his half of the crayon, and they have a big fight in a park with a Providence newsstand that does not exist in like the center of it. So we get to see this old newsstand keeper react to everything that's happening. And it's, Jermaine Clement draws something, and then Harold draws something, and they're having like, this is completely fine. Like, they get the draw sort of joke, like showdown style from a Western, and that's all work of fine and good until Jermaine Clement somehow swallows his half of the crayon. I don't remember exactly how it happens, but it's like something that Harold draws ends up like hitting it out of his hand and then shoving it down his throat. This is all real stuff that happens in Harold and the Purple Crayon, by the way. I'm not making any of this up. And then because he has eaten the crayon, he can now create anything he wants. He essentially becomes the crayon.
Wait, so he doesn't have to
He doesn't need to draw it. He just kind of moves his fingers and purple mists come out of them, and then whatever he thinks of becomes reality. He essentially becomes a purple mage, which is not a type of mage that existed before, as far as I'm aware of. But then what he does with it is he turns the entirety of this park into like basically the mountain at the end of Lord of the Rings. I can't think of the name of it right
Mordor.
now. Mordor. Like, it is, lava is flowing and they're all like on their own little islands and they have to get around. Because Harold had his imagination restored by Mel, Porcupine and Moose show up on the crazy tricycle motorcycle that they rode to Jonathan Crockett's. Terry is there. Like, it's this whole big thing that's happening, and he's just creating stuff. And it ends with Harold drawing a second Spiderfly. That Spiderfly flies down into Jermaine Clement's stomach and retrieves the half of the crayon. And then without
this is the backdoor alien movie that like Romulus did so well that they were just like, oh, Scott, you gotta make another one, and he's like, I'm working on it, and the truth is he already released it.
It was like, I was so upset because like up to the part that we had seen, right, this movie about like the power of imagination and like what it means to be an adult and the fact that like you can still have joy in your life. You don't need to be like freaking Patel from Animal Control was her manager at Ollie's, and he's like, you need to kill that part of you that dreams and believes in anything else if you want to succeed at Ollie's. And like, oh, okay, what
Which
the
I'm
fuck
sure Ollie's was happy to have that kind of representation.
I don't know. I mean, like, we joked that Ollie's is like, oh yeah, you can use our name, but you cannot show people what it looks like in any of our stores or what it looks like outside of any of our stores. We want to raise the awareness of Ollie's, but we want people to think that it is beautiful inside and that like like it's like, you can use our name, but do not show people the stores. If people knew what the stores looked like, they would never come. But yeah, so then he gets the crayon pulled out of him. Because the crayon's no longer inside of him, everything that he drew stops existing, which again, not how it was established. It's a third way that the magic works in this movie that is for children. And like, really, I'm just like, this is pissing me off because I was into it. And then, the crayon is connected back together. So he has the one big crayon. And they draw a door because they've established that they can draw doors to other realities. And they draw a door to Gary's fantasy land and are like, you can go live in your fantasy world. And as they open the door, there is Zooey Deschanel as the fantasy character.
Cop out. That's not, no.
Oh, it gets...
She's not drawn.
No, she's, well, kind of. But then it even goes further than that, and we'll get there. I'll give the tag. And so he goes and lives in his fantasy world. They go back to the Jonathan Crockett house, right? Because they only got there and found out he was dead, and then they immediately left. They go back to it, so they go through and do all of the stuff that is literally... You want to talk about a Sejan's Gambit in a fucking trailer? The trailer is the last scene of the movie.
Oh, really?
Which is them in the Jonathan Crockett house and them looking at the Harold statue and all of this other stuff. And then the old man wrote this letter to Harold. So the docent gives Harold this letter from the old man that's like, I mean, if your imagination is big enough, I knew eventually you would come to this world. I hope you had a good time in that. And then they draw a door back to it, and Harold, Moose, and Porcupine go back to their world, but Zooey Deschanel gives him a 16-pack of crayons. So, now the world can be all the colors, not just purple. And damn, roll credits. And that's
there's such a sweet concept here that they just don't ever care to engage with, and it's so disappointing. Man, that's fucking wild. That is such a cop out though, with having her be there but being on the other side of this door. It is as if somebody walks on stage at the end of a Chekhov play and was like, "Well, somebody got shot just now," and you're just like, "Motherfucker!"
No, the worst part about it, right? Not even the worst part about it, but that cop out. Is that he goes to her, right? And he's all in princely regalia, and he's Gagarin, or whatever his fucking name is. And he's like, fair Mary, and they have this conversation. And then, the final reveal is that she's in a relationship in his fantasy world. So,
that's what makes him an incel, is because even in his fantasy, he's celibate.
Yup. Involuntarily celibate. And that's a whole moment. I'm just like, what the fuck? And then when they go back to the world, Porcupine, she falls because apparently her head is what turns back into a porcupine. And then she's like, oh, I'm small again and I don't have thumbs. And then fuck Porcupine. We don't hear anything else about her and how she's revolving. But Moose is happy to be home. It's nice to have hooves again. And then Harold draws a goddamn rainbow with all of his crayons. And you're like, okay. I'm pissed off about this movie because I was having fun. You had a really great concept, and then you made him a fucking I can create magic because I ate the crayon. Even that doesn't make any sense. Why would the crayon imbue upon you the power to create anything from your mind?
It's that really weird thing that happens in these existing IP move to film things, where it seems like the majority of the time the choice is to go in this weird direction to make a movie that they think will appeal to modern audiences, but not embrace the fact that you're using an IP that is not from a mod. If the reason you're making this is that you believe that there was something so special about the original thing that it is timeless, why would you not embrace that in the piece that you're now making? To turn around and turn it into something completely not what Harold of the Purple Crayon ever was. Because, I don't mind them coming to the real world thing. The idea of using the Purple Crayon in the real world, all very cool. Visual concepts and the idea of pure imagination and the magic. And the idea that even him coming to the real world and learning that, things happen here that are not always fun and happy. It's what makes you important, Harold, is the fact that in your world things are always this way, is an important stability that we want kids to have because they're not going to be lucky enough to have that here. I think all of that is beautiful stuff for them to talk about. I don't understand needing to have a giant magic battle in the middle of a park at the end of this movie. I don't understand needing to introduce this idea of adult fantasy to the whole thing. Really, what is this wild world that they have thrown this man into? Is he gonna die over that? There's a whole level for me of now I'm really worried. I didn't love Gary, but I'm really worried about him.
Yeah, and the other thing is that yes, eventually he becomes hyper selfish and he wants the crayon for himself, but they never really did anything prior to that moment where you're like, I fucking hate this guy, right? He just wasn't super helpful, and he had a crush on Zooey Deschanel. For him to become this big bad, it just, it hit me the wrong way.
Yeah, I don't even understand why the movie requires a big bad, right? Again, it's just that idea of we're going to structure the film in a way that we think audiences want a movie to be structured, as opposed to, looking at this thing and being like, okay, Harold doesn't fight. Harold doesn't come up against things that he needs to like draw the mech robots to defeat. Like that's not what Harold is, right? Why is that the theme of the movie then? I don't know. Like it's a movie that I never intended to engage with. I'm glad we have, but I got to be honest. I think after this I'm probably never going to engage with it again.
Oh, I mean, like I've been looking forward to this recording so that I could purge all of my problems with Harold and the Purple Crayon from my system. And that's essentially what we've just done here. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we move on to what I think are frankly going to be much better topics like this week?
As far as this goes, no,
Yeah,
not
right.
at all.
All right, so I guess the last thing I want to say is that maybe you can explain this to me because I don't get it. It's an IMDb trivia fact, and this is the first feature-length film with major traditional animation to not be based off already existing animated media under the same format/continuity since The Princess and the Frog, released 15 years prior.
So any hand-drawn animation that has come out since then has had some type of existing animated thing that you could base things off of.
Okay.
So there was no Harold and the Purple Crayon animation before this. There were the books. There's
a movie
drawings.
that came out.
Is there?
Yeah,
well, but they said not in the last 15 years, though, right? Because they said since Princess and the Frog, which is only 15 years ago,
made
right?
sure not to be based off already existing animated media under the same format continuity. I guess continuity-wise, it starts with the book, but then so much changes. But like there was Harold and the Purple Crayon in 1959 and in 2001.
But again, that piece of trivia, it mentions since Princess and the Frog, right?
Yeah.
It gives such a wild cutoff. Basically, it says basically what it's saying is in the last 15 years, this has not happened since Princess and the Frog. Before that, it could be like it didn't have something in the last 15 years that existed for it to base itself off of. Is all that it is the most non-fact I think you've ever read me from IMDb.
It feels like a nothing fact is what I just wanted to confirm because it's like.
Yeah, it is a nothing fact. All it is saying is that there has been nothing Harold and the Purple Crayon related. So there wasn't like a PBS Kids show. There wasn't anything in the last 15 years. Before that, there could have been, but in the last 15 years, there just has not been. So like in a weird way, it's just talking about kind of what I was getting at of like, this is like an untouched IP from so long ago that you feel the need to bring back. Like, and that's interesting because I do think there are kids that still would enjoy this, do enjoy this shit. Like, I think that's cool. But like to then not stick to what you think makes this thing so special is a wild choice. But that fact is nothing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And I guess the last thing I want to look at is Harold and the Purple Crayon on Box Office Mojo. Because Zachary Levi lost his mind about people not going to see this movie. Like, how dare people go see Deadpool and Wolverine when we have this going on? Yeah, I made $17 million domestically, and there's no way the budget wasn't more than that. It opened with $6 million. Worldwide, it's at $32 million, rounding up. So, I don't know. I don't recommend this film, is like what I have to say. Like, I got real wrapped up into Porcupine, and I needed to know what happened to her. And
no, if we had not been in the right place at the right time for this movie to be in front of us outside of our own machinations, right?
Right.
We did not choose to put that movie on. We did not it just happened to be there. We ran into this movie in the wild and it encouraged enough thought that we did this, right? I if that happens to you, then I think roll with it. But like beyond that, don't go seeking this film out. No.
Yeah. And if you happen to be at the Village Green in Plainville, Massachusetts, tell them the Say Report sent you. I don't know what's going to happen if you do that, but it'll be fun.
And I cannot wait. I cannot wait for the 15 years from now, some couple of chuckle fucks like us recording how they love this movie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I look forward to that episode. I look forward to finding whatever is like the counterpart of podcasts 15 years from now, or like, we're celebrating the 15th anniversary of Harold and the Purple Crayon. Do you remember where you were when you saw this, Drago?
Drago? Yes, comrade.
Yeah, so you took it in the right direction. I don't know. But that's it. So now let's talk about happier things. I put something kind of weird and cryptic into the Discord. Invitations to the Say Report Discord are available on Facebook and X, formerly Twitter. And we might be branching out into other social media because of the results of a thing that happened on Tuesday. But we're talking about happy things today. And it is related to the fact that the last proper episode of the Say Report, I talked about being excited for the Ode to Castlevania DLC for Vampire Survivors. And Sejin said, do you think this is the end of Vampire Survivors? To which I responded, no, there might be more, but I think this is where we're finally going to see an actual factual vampire in the world of Vampire Survivors. And I said something that was crazy. And I'm like, and I believe we're going to see a vampire in Vampire Survivors before we see the River City 2 Girls 2 Double Dragon DLC actually drop. And I'm happy to report, spoilers to Sejin, spoilers to Claude. I bought both of them this DLC because it was just so affordable at $3.50. There's a vampire in Vampire Survivors now. An actual, factual, I want to suck your blood vampire. Which also made me think, DLC for Vampire Survivors, straight up, Hotel Transylvania. Let's make it happen, guys. But no, I said that, and weirdly, as soon as I unlocked the vampire in the Ode to Castlevania DLC, WayForward announced the actual release date for the Double Dragon DLC for River City Girls 2.
And your Purple Crayon goes on. Your powers have
and the powers
really
of my
outdone themselves
pure
this time.
imagination just continue to work. It felt very, very strange. But I want to talk about Ode to Castlevania. Now,
Yeah,
you were here, so you didn't really get a chance, as much time as me to play it. How much would you say you've completed in the Ode to Castlevania so far?
Oh, less than like 1%. I know that for a
That's
fact.
crazy. I love that.
I unlocked Leon, right? He's the first one that you can kind of get to there. I unlocked Leon. I started to kind of pick up on some of the mechanics of the map, you know, and on getting like things to unlock the doors and stuff. There is I have some feelings right now about it. I've done 2 runs, to be clear.
That's
like,
completely
I've
understandable.
Two runs so far in the
Somebody
DLC.
was playing Brothership, which we'll talk about that a little bit later too.
Yeah, but so, I did one run in order to unlock Leon, and then played a run as Leon. Right, like that's what I've done so far. And we talked about how I kind of felt like, this feels like this is what they've always been working towards. Not so much that I think this is the last DLC, because as I said last time, and I'll say it again, they're making too much money off of this shit for them to not continue this boat. Like, why wouldn't they?
Right.
And there's all sorts of IP that you can have fun with. They've already kind of broken the seal by going with something like Among Us already. The fact that they've already done an Among Us crossover means that they could pretty much do anything at this point. Like, it's all about like, what do you want to see? Almost Mortal Kombat-esque, right?
Yeah. I'm half expecting a Balatro crossover, since like the vampire, like the director and other characters from this, there's a Balatro deck that is Vampire Survivors.
Well, and they could do some card stuff. That would be really interesting with the ways that cards
they have the
play, the card
randomazo
mechanics
and everything. So
that would be that would not be surprising either, right? Yeah, so exactly that, right? So I don't think it's going to be the last DLC, but there is something about the release of this DLC that just feels so important in kind of the grand lore, meta lore of this game. This feels like, and after playing it, I can now say for sure, feels like this is the game they always wanted to make. The idea that you go around the castle, you do have this idea that you can go looking for bosses, you go looking for certain items so that you can get into certain rooms and things. This feels like this is what they always kind of really wanted Vampire Survivors to eventually be. And this goes back to the fact that like when Vampire Survivors first even came on the scene, it had Castlevania assets in it. Like they have never hidden their connection to Castlevania. And now seeing the way that you play around in this one and the ways that the level designs work, the switch from like the isometric plane to the side scrolling plane.
That's
and like
incredible when that happens. Yeah.
Right. And then like the boss fights that you come up against both in both types of worlds, like there's just all sorts of good character like pulls. The music is like this feels so much like the game I think they always kind of had wanted to be making. And like they've done it. They've made it. It's out there now. And I'm very curious to see if there is a Vampire Survivors 2, if they just keep rolling down the DLC train, because it's not hurting them to do it that way.
Yeah, I wouldn't be. Now that it's on every platform, I would expect a couple more DLCs and everything like that. But the joke since early access was we cannot find a vampire, right? We call ourselves the Vampire Survivors, and yet as we explore our world, we find coffins, but there's no vampire in the coffin.
I thought the bit was, I was always thinking the bit was going to be that we were going to find out we were vampires.
We were the vampires all along.
Vampires.
Yeah.
We are the vampire survivors. Like
we're the surviving vampires, and I get that. All right, so I got the DLC as soon as it was available. Right, I was home sick from work on Halloween, so pretty much all I did was play the Ode to Castlevania DLC. And
and really, that's really brave of you, Dev. I know how much Castlevania really rubs you the wrong way, so I applaud you for what you've done.
Such an asshole. I love you, Sejin. But yeah, but I played it, right? And when you first get spoilers for the Ode to Castlevania DLC for Vampire Survivors, but like you just need to understand it. The first thing that you have to do is you are given 20 characters to figure out the unlock condition for, and the ultimate character, the final character that you unlock is Richter Belmont. Richter Belmont being the Belmont from Rondo of Blood and the Belmont from the beginning of Symphony of the Night. Arguably the most famous Castlevania games to like popular culture, right? Like Symphony of the Night, people know Symphony of the Night. And there's thing. And actually I've been working on objectively, I think that Rondo of Blood is the first objectively good Castlevania, though I did just play
Symphony of the Night.
Yeah,
like in the grand scheme of things, Symphony of the Night did for the Castlevania series what Super Mario World did for the Mario series, in that it really just kind of nailed down some definitives for everybody. This is what makes it a Castlevania game. This is the one we'll compare other games to and say, well, it doesn't quite do what Symphony of the Night does, so I feel like it's missing this. It becomes that baseline for Castlevania games.
Yes. That is it, and that's what it is. That's what Symphony of the Night is. And again, I played Dracula's Curse again, and goddamn, that game's awesome too. But Rondo of Blood, like with the save states, with the multiple ways to clear levels, like in terms of Retrovanias, where like it's linear, start to boss, next level, start to boss, like that's really good. So Richter is the last one that you unlock, and when you bring Richter to the throne room, where you fight Dracula in Vampire Survivors, it triggers a scene where Dracula joins the Vampire Survivors. So, like, that's the thing that happens. You have that to look forward to if you put in the time to unlock all of the characters, Sejin. Those first 20 characters. And it's a beautiful little scene. I'm not going to say what happens in the scene, but once Dracula joins, there is a big, mighty boss fight that happens. And if you win that boss fight, you roll credits. And after the credits, there is a whole post-credit sequence that really makes good on the marketing of the Ode to Castlevania DLC of everyone is here. Because those first 20 characters, like Reinhardt and Carrie from Castlevania 64, are not characters that you unlock, but they're shown in the post-game stuff. And as it turns out, all of the other characters where you're like, well, why wasn't this character in there? They're all unlocked once you get Dracula to join the Vampire Survivors. So you start with 20, and then you unlock another 20 people to unlock. And that is why at 12:52 a.m. on November 1st, I sent to Sejin, the Castlevania DLC is fucking massive. And that's because I spent the whole day to unlock Richter. I did it, and then I went to sleep. And then I woke up, and then I checked my freaking unlock stuff, and I had a thing called the miserable pile of secrets. So I had to find the item called the Miserable Pile of Secrets, which is a reference to Dracula in Symphony of the Night at the end of Rondo of Blood saying, "What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. Have at you!" And then you fight Dracula. There's a boss that is locked behind you defeating Dracula. I mean, getting Dracula to join you, not defeating Dracula. But, having Richter have a conversation with Dracula and unlock 20 more people, making it to 40 characters that are now unlockable in the game. And then if you go beat that boss, he drops the item called the Miserable Pile of Secrets. And if you go to your secrets menu in Vampire Survivors, there are now 40 more characters to unlock. This $3.99 DLC introduces 80 additional characters into Vampire Survivors. And
Man, they still got that random mode where you can get anybody?
They have a random mode where you can get any weapon. You don't really necessarily get the boosts and the boons of each character.
But there's not a random mode for character?
There's a way that you can just randomly start and it'll choose from there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Sorry.
Imagine, that's the dream, man.
Right. Yeah.
You could play that game for 2 days straight and never play the same run because you'd have a different character each time.
Yeah, it is like next level. So I have unlocked the 40 characters that have regular unlocks tied to it, like the 373 unlocks that you have. And then I have, of the secret ones left, I still have 30 people that I need to figure out how to unlock. But the one that really means something is the conversation that was happening around this when they're everyone is here. And a bunch of people with the surname Belmont, those are all in that initial 20. But the one Belmont that wasn't was Soleil Belmont, who is technically the antagonist of the second Game Boy game. And that's because he's a Belmont who's corrupted by Dracula, and he tries to destroy his father, and it's all this crazy stuff. Soleil is an unlockable character. And I figured out how to unlock him, and I can't believe I'm playing as Soleil Belmont in this game. That the fact that I've played as Reinhardt and Carrie from Castlevania 64, which it's always fun when Symphony of the Night and Castlevania 64, there's this article out there. I'll post it in the supplemental materials. I'll need to find it. Where they're Symphony of the Night looks like garbage. 2D animation in 1997. This is not what the people want. And they are praising the shit out of Castlevania 64 as this is it. But nobody plays Castlevania 64 anymore. Most people will play through Symphony of the Night if given the opportunity. So it's just one of those hindsight and finger on the pulse moments that just was so off base at the time. But 80 characters, and I still haven't unlocked everything, and I just keep doing runs because Siegen said, you're playing as a different character, you're working as a different character every time. And yes, it's one map that came, but 80 characters, that means that you need 40 weapons, and those weapons then need to have upgrades. And also with weapons in this one, some of them it's you need to get 3 separate weapons to combine them into an evolved form. There's a lot going on in this DLC.
Yeah, I mean, but you did mention the one map, right? And I think that's one of the few places where they really keep a really tight ship on it.
Yes.
Right? They're really making sure that it's a nice, tight experience, that you know what you're doing. And it becomes more and more about, I want a different character each time because I do want to try and figure out my ways around this a little bit differently each time. Is it better for me to go after this stuff than that stuff? And that kind of conversation that you were having in the main game. But in order to allow that to still be okay, keeping it to that one map, and I love the navigation. I think I've said before that I understand it's kind of the antithesis to Vampire Survivors Vanilla to have a more directed path to go on, but without that directed path, I get really kind of bored really quick.
I get that. Yeah.
Having this where it is so direct, where it is really you need to go this way, you need to get this. Okay, you have the ability to unlock that door now. Okay, let me go for that door. You unlock that door, do what's behind it. Having that there at that half an hour feels really good. It does feel really good.
And as massive as the map is for you now, the map gets bigger the more characters that you unlock.
I'm
So
not
like,
surprised.
and so they really put in the time to make this beautiful level and all of these characters. And initially, when it first came out, you could not use any of the golden eggs that you can unlock, but they've since reversed that. So like, you can just go ham in the Castlevania map now. You have the option. So it's.
I have noticed that there was a couple of things it was telling me to go for that were seemed to be off map. So I'm not surprised to hear that you can kind of go out further. That's awesome, because giving it piecing it out to me so that I can get to kind of know things is choice.
Yeah.
I really am so impressed with what they do with this DLC, and the more and more I hear about it, the more and more I see in it, the more I just feel like this is it. This is the game that they had always kind of been intending to make. And like Vampire Survivors being released when it was just lightning in a bottle that it just happened to be at this state that it was still just bomb ass to play, right?
Yeah. And now that they've gone there, and I'm excited for other DLCs they do or what they do. I wouldn't mind a game that was maps like this, where like you actually have missions in the map to complete. And like there are moments where you're in a 2D fight as opposed to.
Well, you kind of got there, right? With some of the later maps, like unlocks in the original, like more original game. Like I'm starting to think of like the Milk Factory. Like from there on, whenever you unlock something, there are some very direct things they tell you should do, but nothing that says you need to do it, right?
Right.
Whereas like this one, there is like legitimately moments where it's like, all right, every door's fucking locked. I got to go find a key, and so it's a very specific thing that you just need to get done. Whereas, I know, like it's antithetical to the idea that you were able to just kind of go wherever you needed to or wanted to get this to survive was so key to the early days of this game's success. I just, as someone that the early days of this game did not always like light my ass on fire like it did for everybody else. This feels more like what I would want from this kind of experience. Right. I say that, but I also sit around and still do like Bounty of One and Brotato runs all the fucking time, and like only touch Vampire Survivors whenever there's like a big update. I don't know what the difference is between them, but yeah, this feels really good for me.
I mean, I think the Vampire Survivor problem is, and as somebody who got in when it was still early access, like you play it once they drop a bunch of content. But then once you've completed all that content, it's like, oh, I want to go elsewhere, right? Because, like, I did everything that they asked. And a lot of the times, they ask a lot of you when they update the content, right? They'll give you, like, one level, but that level has, like, 5 goals that you need to complete to consider that level completed. Something like Brotato or Bounty of One, like, those games are really endless in so many ways. In ways that like even unlocking, even if I were to unlock all of the potatoes, and I've not done that, there are still potatoes that I have to unlock. Like, I feel like anytime I go in, the game itself is a little bit different. And I think it's just because the simplicity of it. There is a weird sort of narrative to Vampire Survivors that I think that watching how people interacted with it in the early days, they realized, oh, we can do this. And there's no fire under my ass. That's why anybody, and I'm saying it again, right? This is the eternal Vampire Survivors PSA to players and to people who have engaged with that game. Go to the unlock menu if you're not sure what to do next. Because that is literally your shopping list on what to do, what to challenge yourself to accomplish in order to make more game appear.
Yeah. I think the problem for me is that's fine. It's just it becomes a game of menus. Then it's not there in front of me in the game as I'm going around. What's my drive? What's my visual drive? What's my what's the points racking up giving me? It's all like we're talking like really really deep philosophical game design shit, and that's really where this is. And the fact of the matter is what's right for you is not right for other people, right? Like what I want out of this game is clearly not what a bunch of other people did. This game did perfectly fine without Siegen's help being on its board the whole time. But like there's this idea that every game is going to kind of meet these expectations or not, right? And what is it that pulls you one way and the other? And it's just really interesting to me that I have found such a very specific line in this particular genre of just like, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. There's something about the simplicity of Brotato. There's something about Bounty of One. There's something about like there's all sorts of silly ones out there now that like you jump into for a little bit that like I don't know. There's something about it being quick and simple and dirty, and I'm out. Right then, I'm good. I'm done. Whereas like Vampire Survivors feels so epic, right? It feels so big, and feels like it's going to require such a commitment from me for this. Like at least you have to play for the half an hour. You have to at least do that if you want to really make a dent in your run. Like otherwise, you're just getting what, money, I guess, maybe. But like beyond that, it's really rare that I complete a goal and don't have just like 2 minutes left on the clock anyway, right?
Right. Like that, and that became a weird thing for me because I'm like, well, I've accomplished what I have to accomplish. Do I just want to back out and then I can move towards the next thing? But I'm like, but I'm at the 28-minute mark. Like I can get to the end. But now the characters are so strong and the weapons are so strong that like I can hold my own against the Red Death even if I don't have the Shroud or the Corridor of Time. So it's like getting to 30 minutes is not necessarily the end anymore, right? Like some of the whips, like Leon's whip, he has the Whip of Alchemy. That
Right.
evolved does so much damage, and like it can freeze enemies. So it's just like, it's weird how the Ode to Castlevania DLC has changed what is the end of a run for me. Getting to 30 minutes, you get a clear, right? You've cleared the level as whatever character you were playing as. But it used to be like indicated by the fact that like the Red Death comes and takes and ends the game. And if you can defeat the Red Death, then the Gray Hand comes and the Gray Hand cannot be killed. So it ends the game. Like it does not feel that way anymore with some of the things they added to this DLC. So there's definitely going to be probably some balancing stuff that happens with it. And I'm excited for that stuff to happen too. Because like they put this out there and I think they're very proud of it. But already, like let me look at the beta devlog right here. Where's Vampire Survivors? There it is. Since the game released on the 31st, 1, 2, 3, there have been 3 additional updates just on the beta level to like try to fix stuff. Something came out beta only on the 31st when it released. Then on the 1st, that fixed a couple of like bosses not showing up and things like that. And then the final public beta was updated the 7th of November. And gosh, it looks like 15 bullet points of how them fixing stuff. So yeah, like they know that it's not perfect right now. They're still working behind the scenes. But you know, and a vampire happened before the River City Girls 2 DLC happened, and that made me happy that I called that shot. But to answer the question of, is this the end of Vampire Survivors? I don't think so. We know that there's a director's cut out there. People have played it in like at London events and game events. So we know that there's a director's cut version of the game that exists.
What would that be?
It's got more characters and things like that. Like it's, yeah, like there's a lot more there. But like, I can't believe that there's more after the 80 characters they just dropped in our laps with the Ode to Castlevania DLC. And some of the characters are just type in the code. Like find the entry and type in the code there. Like to play as Charlotte and Jonathan from Portrait of Ruin, you go to the secrets and you type in loud, shout, or shout loud, and it unlocks them and you're controlling both of them at the same time, which is cool because it lets you like experience the co-op mechanics if you don't have someone to co-op with. So I don't know. It's there's just a lot there, and I wanted to celebrate that. But it's also No New Game November, which means that Mario and Luigi Brothership releasing. I didn't think I was going to get to play it, but I was lucky enough to get early access to it, much like IGN, who gave it a 5 out of 10, and that like burned down the video game industry. But I mean, you started playing a little bit of it, Siege. And what are your first impressions of Mario and Luigi Brothership?
Well, so to give you a clear idea of how much I've played, it is not much. It's just an hour or so. I just got to the concept of Luigi intuition, I think is what they call it.
Luigi Logic. It's called Luigi Logic.
Thank you. Luigi
It's
block. Okay.
ridiculous,
Yes.
and I love it.
It's a fun little side mechanic. So it is not at all like any of the other Mario and Luigi games that I've played, at least not yet. There's a lot. I hate to say it, but there's a lot less going on right now. But I'm finding it that the game is doling stuff out at a very slow pace. So what I mean by that is there may actually be more to come that I'm just not getting yet, right? For my example of this is that for the first 10 minutes, the dogs were barking and I kept trying to fucking pause the game so I could see what was going on, and there was no pause. Like there was no ability to pause the game.
Nope, you don't get the
And I was
pause
like,
until the little pig guy gives you the map.
right. It comes 10 minutes into the game, a character that you meet gives you the ability to pause the game. And it's just like, the fuck? Like what a weird choice. It comes along with the ability, like Devon said, to pull up the map, go into your menu and use items. Like it comes along with all of this other standard shit. But I appreciate that they're introducing the mechanic of that stuff at that time. But before that, at least give me just just a dull screen or something. Just nothing. The game literally just does not stop. You hitting what should be the pause button, you're just like, I guess there's no pause in this game. What a weird choice. Like, and then to find out that it had to be given to me, I was like, all right, this is silly. So there's a lot of that going on at the moment where I'm just like, I feel like this is really thin for a Mario and Luigi RPG experience because I love these games on. They were mostly on the DS, right?
Yeah, the
I
first
played
one
them
is a
more.
Game Boy Advance game, and then
Yeah.
the Partners in Time, Bowser's
Inside
Inside Story,
Bowser's
Dream
Inside Story,
Team, and Mario and Luigi X Paper Mario are all DS games. Though I
Yeah.
think that Dream Team and Paper Mario are 3DS. So like
Oh, that's true.
there is I
Yeah.
forget that they're two separate things until just now.
So I've played the majority of them, and I've to be clear, emulated most of them.
That's
Like
fine.
that's just the way that I could interact with these games because I came to them really late, is what I'm getting to. Like I didn't have a DS, and when I did have a 3DS, I think that I finally picked up because of the Paper Mario of it all. I think I picked that one up. But like beyond that, I had not played them IRL, like or in real time rather. Like I had to come to them much later, and because of that, because of the way that Nintendo does their shit, I had to emulate. And so like I had a really weird experience with those. So I was kind of excited for this one because it's going to be the first time that I really get to like sink my teeth into the series as a fan of the series, into a legit version of the game and all of that. So when it starts out as thin as it does and as slow as it does, and like the art choice like works really well in the cutscenes, but once you're playing it, it looks almost like a phone game. There's some stuff going on that I was really kind of like, uh-oh, because I had heard the stuff about IGN and the bad reviews, and they weren't the only ones that gave it kind of lower reviews. I think Polygon or somebody gave it like a 7 out of 10 or something. You know, not the worst review in the world, but of course, because it's a Nintendo game featuring Mario, people are like losing their shit. The idea that Nintendo could allow something like that to happen, impossible. But you know, the game has some stuff that it's doing in the beginning that I was not a big fan of, but it is starting to build slowly. I have some questions about like the fact that like I was on an island and running into shit where I was like, oh well, I obviously don't have the ability to do this yet, or I don't have Luigi with me to do this yet, so I need to come back to this later. And so far, they have not let me figure out how to go back to that one very little inconsequential island. That's just that there was just like one or two things there that I just really knew I wanted to check out. It's killing me. They're like, I can't do that yet. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm hoping, fingers crossed, is going to be coming later in the game. And getting to where I'm at with like the Luigi logic and the mechanics there and the ability to like, you know, spring up walls and things like that. Like I'm getting more and more of the Mario and Luigi aspects that I wanted from this game. So I'm still holding out hope that like this game can really impress me, because like there is some fun stuff going on in the story to talk about things I do like. Like I like the Wotanists, and I like the fact that they have to do the connector tree, and they need to connect the islands, and going around on this ship like with all the great little puns and stuff. There's some really good stuff going on that way. So like I'm more than happy to continue playing, but from like a mechanic perspective and things like that, like from the video game side of things, it has not got me yet, I will say.
Yeah, I mean it's so my biggest complaint where you say it doesn't feel like a Mario and Luigi game is the fact that in combat you use A for everything. even when you're Luigi. So, like, one of the things that has changed is that every attack is now like a brother attack. Where in the other games, for them to work together, you'd need to choose specifically your brother attack, and then it would be hit A for Mario's part of it, hit Luigi's B for part of it, and then you're going to do it. One of the big changes from Brothership is that if Mario's attacking, you got to do something with Mario, something as Luigi, something as Mario, in sort of the timed hits from like something like Super Mario RPG. And for Luigi, it's the same thing. But specifically, in all of the games I've played, and I've played from the first one, Superstar Saga, through to Dream Team, I never touched the Paper Mario one because I did not like the 3DS Paper Mario sticker star, so I was not interested in playing them together. Plus, Dreamland, I eventually got to a point where I'm like, I'm done with this game. I'm not having fun anymore. And I feel bad to say that.
Dreamland's all right.
What was that?
Dreamland's all right. Bowser's Inside Story is the best. Like, it is by and far the best one of the entire freaking franchise.
I like Partners in Time. But Partners in Time, so like the first one came out and then Partners in Time was like ready to go right away. Like it was the Christmas release like that same year that Superstar Saga came out. They're like, oh, we have a Game Boy Advance one, but now here's the DS one. And it was printed in such low quantities that like once Bowser's Inside Story came out and hit huge, that game did so well. Because you're not wrong. It's probably like, it's everything kind of coming together in this beautiful package. Plus you get to play as Bowser again. There's a lot of beautiful stuff that's going on in that game. Toys R Us became the exclusive place to get a physical copy of Partners in Time. Like as they reran it with a only at Toys R Us like sticker on it. And wow. I'm like, I still have my game. And I didn't finish it. I'll admit that like playing that one, I got to a very like almost the end of it. And then I stopped playing. So when Inside Story came out, I went through the first two again and then beat Inside Story, loved it, and was hyped up to do Dream Team. But like all the Luigis of it, like it was like trying to make Luigi Bowser from Bowser's Inside Story just did not work for me. So I can't say anything about the Paper Mario one, though I know that it's sort of similar where Mario's A, Luigi is B, and then Paper Mario is X and Y. So I'm happy about that. I like that. And in the world, when you're exploring, you jump with Mario with A, you jump with Luigi with B, and eventually you're going to get hammers, and those are on X and Y. And I'm all about that. But the fact that in battle, A is still the thing that selects whether you're Mario or Luigi has fucked me up in the timed mini games as Luigi more times than I could count. And I've only put 2 hours into the game.
Can I clarify what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because like when you go into combat, you do still pick which brother you want to be, but you still have A and B mechanics depending on which brother you are.
Right. That does happen. No. But it's like, so it's Mario's turn, right? Do you want to use an item? Do you want to attack? Or do you want to run away? Right? Like those are the 3 basic ones you start with. When you hit attack, Mario jumps, and then in order to do his time thing, you have to hit A. And then Luigi, you need to do like a B thing, and then you have to hit A again. When you do Luigi, you choose what you want to do, use an item, retreat, or attack. You use the A button. But in all of the other games, he was the B button. So then when it comes time to do the timed attack, you're already on B because you just selected with B. But you select everything with A. And I dug through all of the options to see if there was a way to like go to a classic mode. Thinking of like the God of War, where because it had become LNR or how you attack in the God of War that was set in Norway, you could go in and set it so that your attacks are on square and triangle like the other God of War games. There's nothing to do that. A, to confirm what you want to do in battle, and then you need to remember which brother you're doing it as for the buttons you need to press. That just feels so counter to what Mario and Luigi as a game was. if that makes any sense.
I honestly, I didn't even notice that. I was so happy with the idea that when you do attack as Luigi, you press B, and when you do, and even when you do the brother moves, you then have to do an ABA or a BAB.
Yeah.
Like it gives it just a little oomph. I do hope we get a little bit more, as you mentioned. I'm sure there other things will show up in the mechanics, but that's just it, right? Is like this game is constantly for me wanting something and believing it's going to be there, but if it ends up not being there, I could potentially end up having some real issues with this game. Whereas, like, you're you're just running into shit already.
Well, I'm just like, well, that's a weird decision. And especially because, like, that was what made these games unique as a Mario RPG, right? Not Super Mario RPG, but an RPG with Mario characters. The fact that everything with Mario is tied to one button and everything with Luigi is tied to the other button. And then, like, that was further explored in Partners in Time, where Baby Mario and Baby Luigi, they took over Y and X. Like, that was cool. That was a cool way to do that. And it's just not there. And, like, what you're talking about in, like, the world where, like, eventually you'd get moves to traverse, I have completed the first 3 connections, right? So 3 separate islands. That's how far I got in this game before November happened, right? I had early access prior to November, and I got to play it, and I got to enjoy it. And then November came, and I'm like, I'm not going to do anything more. No new games November. It's time to clear my backlog. And I haven't really done that, I'll be honest with you. But we're only, 10 days in, right? I have 20 more days to try to be a good doobie on that. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I beat a UFO 50 game yesterday. I beat Barbuda, and that made me super happy because it was kind of just an accident. Like, suddenly I was in the final boss fight, and I'm like, oh, okay. And now I've beaten Barbuda 4 times because that's the type of person that I am. I had to get the cherry. Anywho, I cleared those 3 islands, and honestly, it did not feel like I was out of the tutorial yet. And that was weird. Like, I had my big place to go. I had my, like, we need to get here. And that felt like that's where you're going to get your star from Super Mario RPG or even the Paper Mario stuff. Like, one of the superstars is at this location. And it's not going to be that. It's just a grand lighthouse is what it's called. And I'm like, I'm not like in any rush to get it. Like, the islands are fun, but I think about something like Echo of Wisdom, where, like, I did not think I was going to like the Zelda mechanic of that game. Ended up loving it. I love summoning little monsters to do my bidding. But part of the reason that works out is that eventually you get the ability, spoilers, to do like a pseudo Link mode. So, like, in boss fights, you can be the sword master, right? And that worked for me. I haven't gotten to the point in Mario and Luigi Brothership, and I've been playing, like I said, for about 3 hours, where it feels like I'm going to get more. Like, so when I heard the 5 out of 10 IGN, I'm like, I kind of get where they're coming from. Because, like, I don't know if I'd go that low. I'm still enjoying the story, and there's some clever stuff here. But then I'm like, yeah, but mechanics-wise, all you're doing is kind of complaining about why isn't this happening? Where is that? And like, I don't know. So have you connected any islands to the Brothership yet?
No.
Okay, yeah.
No, I've like I said, I've only just learned about the Luigi logic, so we're working our way up to our first lighthouse.
Yeah.
We are not there yet.
Yeah. So, like, once that happens, like, there's a weird, like, do we want to go left or right sort of thing, right? And it's like, this could have effects on how the game goes, and I'm like, but it's not going to. It's just, I do this one first or I do that one first. Either way, like, I'm going to get a hammer from one of these people that I go rescue. Like, it was just weird. And I think about, like, Echoes of Wisdom, one of the things that really worked for me was the fact that I was getting to know all of these people in the world. I've compared it to Majora's Mask a lot in talking about Echoes of Wisdom, because it really felt like I need to learn these people, learn these problems, and help them with their problems in order to make sure that I can continue forward in the game. And Brothership, I just, like, don't care about any of the characters. And it's like, it's just like checking stuff off. And then I think about something like Super Mario RPG, where, like, I have such huge connections to, like, the Frog Sage and Mallow and Bellome and all of these other characters through the interactions. Like it just,
right.
It's and even other Mario and Luigi games, right? Like,
yes,
it's just so thin so far. And if you're rating it as the 6th game in a series, right? That also included 2 remakes for the 3DS, right? The only game that did not get a 3DS optimized version in the series prior to Brothership was Partners in Time, right? They re-released Superstar Saga as a 3DS game, and they re-released Bowser's Inside Story as a 3DS game, and that included like full other experiences, a la something like Bowser's Fury with Super Mario 3D World.
Yeah.
So like this series has depth. So when you get to the 6th game in the series and it feels as shallow as this game does, it's just strange.
So somebody pointed out, and I don't know if we talked about this yet, but with the deluge of Nintendo games coming at the end of this year that we've all noted, right? We've talked about that at least. That a lot of these games are actually not even being made like technically in-house. Like, this is not too unusual. I'm not saying. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with them using other companies right now. In a lot of ways, it feels almost like testing them to see what they can do so that they can kind of maybe become more Nintendo in-house developers. But like Echoes of Wisdom was done by a company outside of Nintendo, you know, with obviously like again with Nintendo oversight, Nintendo being involved. This is not them like farming out their stuff to these companies. Rather, they're fucking Nintendo and they're huge. And with this number of games coming out, no shit, they've been making sure that like other development houses. I mean, it's the same way we look at like Game Freak technically being the developers on
Pokemon,
Pokemon, right? So I also just wonder if part of it is just that like. I don't know who it is that actually really dug their heels in to make this game, but it feels like whoever it is was not at the same level as some of the other games that we've seen in the series, which is unfortunate because like this series, I have a very special place in my heart for this series. I think it's very silly. I think it's really cool, the mechanics that they introduce in all the various ones and stuff, and I think it's a really unique thing about Mario that I think not a lot of Mario fans necessarily. Just because somebody's a Mario fan does not necessarily make them a Mario and Luigi series fan. Like there's a lot of people that just don't play these games. And the people that do are fucking fanatics. They're hilarious. The people that are super into these games are some of the silliest fucking Nintendo fans out there with the stuff that they want to see in other games and stuff.
Yeah, it's so this one was made by Acquire. Mario and Luigi Brothership was co-developed by Acquire, so they did Octopath Traveler, and then going back even further, they were responsible for the Tenchu games and the Way of the Samurai games.
Did they do Octopath Traveler 2?
They did,
or did they just do the okay.
Co-developer on Octopath Traveler and Octopath Traveler 2. Where like Super Mario RPG Remake was Art Piazza, and
this all really surprises me then about the character interaction stuff that you were pointing out that I agree with. Like, it feels like the character interactions are really thin in this one compared to other ones because like the whole fucking bit of Octopath Traveler is talking to people and becoming part of that world in different ways as the different like the different people you are in that world and the different stories that get told and having to keep that straight as you go back and forth. Like, I would praise the character work in Octopath Traveler as one of its key elements for success. So to turn around and now be in a game where like it feels like you're not getting that is a bit of a bummer.
I mean, and again, I feel like all I did was complete the tutorial. Like, I feel like the game's really, like, Bowser did not show up again outside of the opening where
length. How are you feeling? Hour length, like how long did you spend time wise?
About 3 hours.
3 hours. I get the impression this is supposed to be upwards of like a 40 to 50 hour game.
34 hours seems to be the general consensus for 100%.
Yeah, so for me it'll be a 40-hour game.
No, like, but that's what they're talking about, is that like the IGN talked about, like, we completed everything that took us 34 hours, and other people, I don't know if it's just AI reading from that and creating their own, but I've seen multiple say it's around the 34-hour mark.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, so the idea of like in 3 hours maybe not feeling that so much yet, but man, they really gotta get us in there, man. They gotta put
Right.
that carrot out there for us to see what the deal is.
Yeah, and I mean, once no new game November is over and I can play something else, I will gladly drop this one in and probably power through it. My ways of the early build of it had some issues, but I enjoyed what I said. But again, like it felt like now we have to get to the Grand Lighthouse, and I'm like, why was the brother ship not moving towards it the whole time I was doing stuff on the island? Like there is not naval. I'm trying to think of like there's stuff where you have to move on the ocean and set your course and follow currents.
Nautical, I believe.
Nautical.
Is the term
Yeah,
you were-
just nautical is what I wanted, right? I was a mariner for a goddamn year of my life, and you'd think I'd know the terminology. Oh, we have to talk about Doctor Odyssey. There's the reminder. We have to talk about what happened in the 6th episode of Doctor Odyssey. Sorry, Sejan, and to all the listeners at home.
Well, let's wrap this brother ship
So we'll
up
wrap
then,
this
and let's talk
brothership
about
up
the
and go
other
to
ship.
the other ship. But yeah, it's just I just felt so disappointed where I'm like, okay, so I set the course of the ship. I'm going to go to the island to do everything that I need to do. And it was more involved, right? Like the 3rd island was a little bit more involved than the ones that led up to it. So I'm like, this is going to be great. By the time I get back to it, like the ship should be like heading towards that Grand Lighthouse that we found out about, and everything will be good. And I got back on the ship, and the ship itself had not moved like at all. So I'm like, you gave a whole speech about like setting course and having all of this stuff happen, and then it didn't do anything like it was supposed to do. That was disheartening, because I'm like, no, I listened to your stupid laws about how to control the ship and where to go, and like you should be back in the other current stream based on how I set course, and you're not. And like that bothers me.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
See how
because
it
like
progresses and everything like that.
I'm only an hour in. Dev's only 3 hours in. So this game has a lot of potential still, I think. So I'm still excited to play it. And like I'm itching to play it as soon as we're done recording today. Like that's what I'm gonna go do after this. Is I'm gonna go have some lunch and play a little bit more brothership before I have to get into like adult mode and do chores this afternoon. But like it's in my plans, right? Yeah. Like so I'm not done with this game yet by any
Good.
means.
And I'm glad. I'm very happy to hear that. Because I just don't know. Like it didn't run great in the original, and a lot of people are saying that like it can barely run on the Switch. So then I wonder if this was developed with the Switch 2 in mind, and if that's part of it. Like I don't know, but we'll see what happens. Like we're not the book is not closed on Brothership just yet. But let's open the book on Doctor Odyssey, because the 5th episode of Doctor Odyssey. I've been saying that they're using a lot of the Devon Decker journals of my time working for the Carnival Cruise Line Company. And it came to a head this week. Wedding week. Someone chartered their entire ship for a wedding. And I wish that were more of the story, because Sejan, do you want to know how many weddings I participated in when I worked for Carnival? Because I've never counted them all up. Too many. Like my Saturdays were... You can go in, but you got to be back on board for 11 a.m. because we have a wedding that they want you as the DJ. And that's because the first time that I DJ'd, it was an all black, and they did an all black wedding party. And I ended up there like, come on, one white guy, dance with us. And that went like, not viral, but like I did the Soul Train, and they were all like, it's so cool that you're willing to do this. So, like, it became known that, like, if you want a fun wedding, Devon should be the tech who's working your wedding on the cruise blogs. Like, that's a real thing that happened. Have you ever been in a Soul Train, Sejan? There's a question for you.
No, I have never had the pleasure, Dev.
Yeah, no, I'm just like, no, I'm just running the music and stuff like that. And they're like, no. You're here. You're part of this party. You're going down to Soul Train. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is going to not end well. And it ended well. So, like, I was expecting the wedding portions of my journals to be what they focused on. But no, it seems like Dr. Odyssey, since the beginning, has been rushing to have an event occur. And that event is a threesome between the 3 medical people on board the Odyssey. So that's Pacey, Dr. Maxwell Banks, Dr. Odyssey himself, Tristan, and Avery. They're both nurse practitioners. And so they dealt with everything at the wedding, which was fucking crazy. I said that they need to stop having people go overboard. They didn't listen to me. They just keep having people go overboard on this damn ship. The groom was only getting married because it was expected of him. Probably a latent homosexual. Also felt like he had demons inside of him. By the end of it, like his mental state was not good. He got into his black tuxedo and just stepped over the edge while they were going 24 knots. And like they didn't know about it because the overboard system, because like they have these $150,000 man overboard systems to detect when a human being goes overboard, as opposed to like a piece of trash, so that they know to stop and try to rescue the person. No, his all black tuxedo made him stealth in the eyes of it, so they did not know that he went overboard, and he died. He committed suicide after having the same rare ringworm infection as the best man who was sleeping with everybody and having to give it to everybody. But all of that wrapped up in this 40-minute television program at like the 25-minute mark. Like it all worked out really quick. So we have, a good 20 minutes that we still got to fill with show. And it was the medical staff. They broke into the kitchen and stole champagne. Devon Decker has done this. And then they sat on deck drinking and talking about their bucket lists. And the final entry on all their bucket lists was to have a threesome. Doctor Odyssey, of course, had already had a threesome. So his bucket list was have a good threesome. The threesome he had in college was disappointing, to say the least. I was more of an audience member than a participant. So it ended with all of them in Dr. Odyssey's cabin, which he has a suite, which like they were all surprised to learn he has a suite, but also, Avery, you've been in his cabin before. What are you talking about? And they're like, oh, so I'm game. So they had a threesome, and then credits rolled on Dr. Odyssey episode 6. And it was... Is
that the finale? Like,
no,
again,
there's more episodes. If there were more show, I would be completely fine with it. If it just ended with like, you guys can now be, a polyamorous grouping because you all kind of got feelings for each other. I'm not excited for what Ryan Murphy does with the remaining. I think it's a 10 episode order for season 1.
I don't understand how a ship is allowed to continue to operate if somebody jumps overboard and the $150,000 system you got to detect it just didn't work because it didn't think about the idea that somebody might wear a black jacket someday on a cruise ship.
Yeah, right? With formal nights, like a 7-day cruise has 2 formal nights where you are not required anymore, right? Because people don't want to be told what to do on vacation, but it's highly recommended that you wear a tuxedo and walk around. So the fact that
yeah. How does this ship get the next episode is them all in court sorry, but your ship is closed and you're all under arrest.
Yeah. So there is this episode 7 that will be airing this Thursday. So we'll get to see the outcome of the threesome, or they'll never mention it again. Let's be honest, it could go either way. It is a 13 episode order for the first season of Doctor Odyssey. So Thursday, December 19th, we'll have the finale. They have the fucking rubber duck episode is going to be the 8th episode, because I don't know if you know about cruise ducks. It has become so prevalent that Carnival Cruise Line's new mascot is a cruise duck, because people hide rubber ducks on ships to find like Easter eggs. And they were cool. There was a lot of, we're not allowing this anymore, but I guess now they're just rolling with it. Yeah, you're right. And the whole thing is that the guy goes overboard and they're like, at the request of the family who chartered this entire cruise ship, we're going to be returning to our home port and ending the trip early. But once they're in port and everything, there should probably be an inquiry into what happened. Right? Maybe a dry dock to look at the system and see what the malfunction was. Right. that whole sequence of code alpha, which is a man overboard. And so I like to think at that part right. But like it was 8 hours after he went overboard, and the captain's like, how fast can we get back there? And the chief engineer, Rosie, love Rosie, would live and die for Rosie. She's my favorite character on this show now. She's like, well, we were going 24 knots. It was 8 hours ago. He's dead. Like, she didn't sugarcoat it at all. Like, she's like, it is a body recovery. It is not a rescue mission. So, like, we can get back there, but with the currents where he supposedly went overboard and all of that, he'll probably wash ashore before we can get anyone out there. And I'm like, I'm glad that she was matter of fact about it. And it was right on the heels of the first mate being like, we think that because he was wearing all black, it didn't detect him jumping into the water. And I'm like, that's cool. That's a cool thing.
I don't know, man. Ryan Murphy is one of those creators that, God bless him for he keeps getting work, but I don't know if I've ever truly been able to get in behind anything he's done. You know, American Horror Story had some really great concepts. Fucking Nip Tuck back in the day was wild new television. So like there was like an interest at that in those at least, but everything else has just been kind of just like, okay. Like, well, I'm glad somebody out there is like digging this shit because I don't understand. Like, I would be so upset after watching this. You said this is episode 6?
This is episode 6.
And they have had multiple people go overboard?
3 people have gone overboard on the show. 3? Yeah. No. The first episode, they just found somebody who was, like, out in the water. They just found a vessel. 2 people have gone overboard. But that person who they found in the vessel, like, Doctor Odyssey jumped overboard to get to her. Like, so, yeah, technically 3, I guess, but, like, he did it. They were moving slow enough where he's like, I have a radio so you can detect me. I'm going to go out there and be with this person and administer medical or emergency medical aid. Yeah, it's like, it's weird. And I want to make sure that everyone knows it's not that I enjoy this program. I am just fascinated by it. Because in the 4th episode, they introduced a new cook character, like a chef who was working for Amy Sedaris' multi-level marketing scheme. And then she was there, and she was a love interest for Tristan, the male nurse practitioner. And she was a big deal in the 5th episode. But then in the wedding episode, that ultimately ended with a threesome, she was nowhere to be found.
Excellent. Fantastic. I'm glad TV can still keep being TV these days.
Yeah. If Doctor Odyssey gets a 2nd season, it will blow my mind. Honestly, every show that I'm watching right now, it feels like this is our final season. Doctor Odyssey, I've said it a million times, but I will say it again. It really feels like, we'll do a pilot and we'll all get paid for doing the pilot. And then like, we'll be able to think of something better for next year. Right? But, you know, we'll all get working on the pilot. You get a little bit of a paycheck, right? And it feels like they didn't make a pilot to be picked up to be a series.
No, it's almost like it's like the fucking producers. Like Ryan Murphy makes this thinking, I'll give him the worst show I could ever make. And then all of a sudden it's like this weird like pickup and like weird hit that nobody can stop watching.
Like, that's what it feels like every episode. Like they don't know what they want to do with it. Like they introduced another character to be a love interest and then immediately she's gone. What is that? It does. It feels like the producers of television, and honestly, it all feels that way. Like High Potential with Caitlin Olsen, like it's just gotten too easy. The 5th episode, I'm like, here's everything that's going to happen. I sent it to Will, and I'm like, just hold this because I don't want to ruin it for the room. I was off on one small thing. It was the other parent. It wasn't the parent I thought didn't. But I'm like, it's one of the parents because this kid is adopted. And, like, this is the mom finding her son, trying to get close to them. And then she's getting close to them, and one of the parents murders her. And my money was on the dad. But then it ended up being the wife, the mother, the adopted mother. And I'm like, you know what? Honestly, though, but come on. Who was thinking this kid's going to be adopted? Right? Like, I said that to the room, and they're like, there's no fucking way the kid's adopted, Devon. You're wrong. And then it happened. And, like, you don't tell us that it's been 12 years since you've talked to your daughter. You don't say 12 years 100 times without the kid being 12 and it having been 12 years being a significant plot point. I've become the plot whisperer again, Sejin. My powers had waned because of the strikes, but now they are in full swing, and I'm sad for everything that I watch.
Oh man, Dev. I don't know. Yeah, there's still joy in the world.
There is still joy
Vampire
in the
Survivors
world.
DLC.
Yeah, exactly. Vampire Survivors DLC. I don't want to play the River City Girls 2 DLC at all. Like, I don't want to do it. I know I shouldn't. And it depends. I got stuff that I'm doing. You know what I'm doing? You're doing Brothership after this. I have pre-screening tickets to go see Red 1. I'm seeing a Christmas movie later today.
I'm so jealous.
Well, it'll be out in theaters before the next episode taping. But yeah, I'm very excited that I was able to. I was looking because Boondock Saints was getting brought back to the theaters today, November 10th, and trying to find a theater that did it. And I found a theater that's like, we don't have Boondock Saints, but we're doing a Red 1 pre-screening if you want tickets. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'll do that. Right? Then I don't need to take off Friday. And I have tomorrow off because it's a bank holiday Monday. It's Veterans Day. You know, bank holiday Monday, that's what they call it European-wise. But it's Veterans Day. Veterans Day is an important day, right? Maybe it's a weird thing to celebrate potentially a week after democracy died, as a lot of people are acting very doom and gloom about the results of the election. Was not a fan of SNL's opening skit. Their cold open kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Of like, we've always supported you, Donald Trump. Like, it was not as satirical or as fun as I think they thought it was.
I don't think it was supposed to be satirical or fun. I think it was supposed to be them shitting their pants.
Yeah, and well, if that was the bit, I mean, I wasn't watching it. I could hear it, and I'm just like, this doesn't work for me. But maybe it works for other people. I mean, SNL in general doesn't work for me. Though I'm upset I haven't seen Saturday Night yet. Like, that movie, potentially the only Oscar bait movie that's out there right now. That's another thing.
I feel almost the weird.
Yeah.
It's weirdly swung back around to feeling like a weird obligation because it seems like the only one, right? When there's a ton of them out now, I don't feel obligated to see any of them like I used to. But now that there's only one, I feel it again.
Right. But I'm going to watch J.K. Simmons be Santa Claus and The Rock be Santa's little helper and Chris Evans be, I think, his character from The Losers. I'm not 100% certain. In Red 1.
I am weirdly excited for that movie. I don't know, but I'm jealous that you get to go see it today.
I like really that. I've been calling it Christmas Jumanji because it's the director of Jumanji and, you know, The Rock and all of that. And that's just been fun because I know that my mother, when we go like to see the film, is going to say, we have tickets for Christmas Jumanji. Just like with Goosebumps, when we saw the Goosebumps with Jack Black, she's like, I'll have one for Jumanji. And the people just stared at her. And they're like, that's not playing. And she's like, oh, the movie that's Jumanji, but scary. Like,
oh, this is Jumanji, but scary. Fantastic.
Yeah,
awesome.
So those are happy memories. And I'm happy that we get to relive another one. Anything else that you want to make sure we talk about this episode? Or I think we hit a lot of stuff.
Did want to just point out that there's a Humble Bundle package out right now that is the TMNT collection comics. So go check that shit out. That's fucking wild. Always good to help out Humble Bundle, and the fact that it's a bunch of really good digital comics for the Turtles. Yeah,
that is it's a good point. I don't really mess with them. I own all of that. I own them all physical. That's the thing. And so, like, digitally, though, it would be nice to be able to just go and bring them up.
Well, you know, like, on the one hand, the whole point of the Humble Bundle is that you give what you can, right? And if part of that is that, like, for the fact that, like, you're not a digital comics guy, but you want to throw the money in, the lowest amount is $1, right? So, like, for $1, you could own them all. Now, you can do much more than that, because the other side of that is also if you don't have access to these, maybe in other ways. Because, like, physical would be great, but, like, I don't really have many places I can go out and get TMNT, like, physical copies of shit right
comic shop, there's a comic shop in Rhode Island that, like, wants my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics. And I get why they want my Ninja Turtle comics. I have pretty much a full collection of them. You know, just through the fact that I know the guys and things like that. Like, my Image collection was prior to Steve Levine's Image Turtle book collection. And he's like, yeah, I'm just throwing it away, right? Like, it's not canon. And I'm like, how much you want for it? And he's like, yeah, like $25. I'm like, oh, okay, $1 an issue? Sign me up, sir. So I get where it comes from. There is, like, when I was buying them, they were not as huge as they are now. And I think the better part about that Humble Bundle, because I perused it a little bit beforehand, it's a lot of the IDW stuff. And even though my opinions on it has changed, Splinter's Fate just was released for Splintered Fate, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate. We played that one on Switch when it came out. It's now on Steam, and the Steam version is the most stable I have ever seen that game, which is crazy because it originally was an Apple Arcade title, and it had some of the same problems that the Switch version had. The Switch version now has random public matches. So if you're somebody who had that game because we recommended it and you got it on Switch, you can now play with randos, and it's not difficult to do. That is something that they added as of November 6th when the game released on Steam. And they were supposed to have DLC for the game on November 6th, but that did not happen. And I'm a little disappointed in that. But also, because it's the IDW books, and it has to take place after issue 125, because the Punk Frogs are such a big presence in the game, I wouldn't be surprised if the DLC is like the fifth turtle, Jenica, right? Like everybody's like, oh, it'll be Casey, or it'll be April, or Angel. And I'm like, no, there's a fifth turtle who like, it could totally be.
Yeah. No, I'll be very curious to see who they bring in. Also, Jenica doesn't show up anywhere else, right? Whereas I feel like, doesn't April show up as like an NPC?
Yeah, right. Like that's the thing. April's an NPC, Angel's an NPC, Casey's an NPC. So like, even Metalhead's an NPC. So like all the like easy ones to point to as like they're all doing other things in the game. And even like Splinter, right? If you're going to do DLC, you can't lock it behind the person that you spend the bulk of the game saving. And then once you save him, you can play as him. But like, people do not like DLC. Like the nice thing about Ode to Castlevania is you can jump right into it. It's just a new level that shows up in your level listing. There's not requirements to play it. But we'll see what happens with that. But like Jenica, the big issue that I have with Jenica is the fact that her name is Jenica and she became a turtle because of a blood transfusion. Like, could you be any more She-Hulk? Seriously.
Yeah, but check out that Humble Bundle package because again, you can pay what you want. I encourage you obviously to pay as much as you can. But if it's something that like you don't normally do digital comics, or you're not sure if you do turtles, like for $1, you can check out some pretty good shit from that. Yeah,
I mean, the fact that almost the first 2 volumes of Mirage issues are represented in the Ultimate collections, that right there is like, that's comic history in your hands. For whatever you're willing to pay. So yeah, that's a good one. I like that. See, just a nice thing to highlight. I think that's it, right? I think that's it. We did an episode of the Say Report. I've forgotten how to end these. No, I'm kidding. If there's nothing else from you, Siegen, may I go into the outro?
No, go for it.
Oh, we're going for it. All right, so this has been the Say Report. Thank you so much for joining us as we recapped our weird experience with Harold and the Purple Crayon and then get into video games and TV. If you want to continue the conversation, we have a Discord. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, invitations are available wherever we are on social media. Right now, that is Facebook and X, formerly Twitter. But again, that can always change, and we'll make sure that you're aware of it. But invitations to our Discord are at both of those locations. Or if you want to kick it old school, you can send an email to thesayreport@gmail.com, and we can facilitate an invite to the Discord for you. Additionally, if you just want to correspond that way, you can just send us emails and we'll read them and we'll respond. And if you want to send an email that's specifically for Siegen, like so that I don't read it, just put Siegen's name in the subject line. And if it's for Devon Decker, just put Devon in the subject line. And our intern, who does not exist, will most assuredly distribute them appropriately. Without anything else said, again, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Say Report. We'll see you next time as William brings us home. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Siegen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so it's delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.